Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's garden video. So I started off the week looking at my greenhouse and kind of seeing how some of the seedlings were doing. You saw some crowded cilantro there, some tomatillos which are coming in nicely, and then my basil, which is also a bit crowded. Here's a look at some of the squash and kind of leftover things I have. A couple peppers, I need to get them in the ground somewhere and I'll figure out what to do with them this week. But because my cilantro, I had started kind of a lot in one seedling tray and I don't like them crowded like that, this is a time for me where I typically pluck them out and then I separate them into individual little trays. I let them grow for another week or so, kind of reestablish some roots, and then I'll pop them in the ground. So pretty much you're going to watch me go through and do that with the cilantro at first, and then I'm going to go through and do it with the basil. I just want everything to have its own seedling tray, like I said, give it a bunch of water, let it soak in, and just give it about a week to establish before it goes in the ground. Once I finished with that task, I went out and I love, like I've mentioned before, how much lettuce I'm able to eat around here. So I went out and harvested a bunch of lettuce. I've got, again, a huge patch going here of romaine lettuce and red leaf lettuce and this black-seeded stimson, which is the more chartreuse version out there. And then this new version I'm trying this year called stem lettuce, which has very nice leaves. They're fine. It's over on the right-hand side. I'm just about to get to it right there. But it grows a really, really thick stalk, which apparently you can saute up and eat. I also noticed that my cauliflower, I've been talking about the plight of the cauliflower a bit this year too, where some aren't doing really well and some are doing good. So I decided to take these little landscape fabric staple things and actually prop up my cauliflower and see if holding them up from flopping around in the wind makes a difference. Because the previous day I had gone out and picked my lettuce, in the black-seeded stimson area, I ran into a problem where these were multi-sowed. I kind of forgot that I did this. I just threw some seeds in the ground. So it's kind of hard to see. I'm trying to show you here, but there's like 4 or 5 separate plants right here, and that just makes it really difficult for the way that I pluck individual leaves off of each stem. So what I ended up doing was kind of pulling them out and only leaving one plant in there, and the extra plants that I had I planted around, so hopefully these will survive. I pulled a bunch of the leaves off to sort of help them in their transition here and getting watered in and everything, but basically I just wanted to have one plant in each area. And I also noticed that my tomatoes are getting big enough that they're starting these offshoots. They're indeterminate types, which means at every leaf node they send off another vine, which will kind of grow, and so they can grow very wild. And to focus sort of the energy for it to grow up, I ended up pulling off, I went around all my tomato plants and pulled off all these little suckers off each leaf node. Here's a look at the cauliflower the next day to see you can see the variability. Like one of them has died, and I pulled some of these out and the roots kind of look bad. I'm not really sure what's going on. All of these are planted at the exact same time. Some are great, some are small. But anyway, I'm watching cauliflower really closely this week. I also took a look at my cabbage and found, again, that some of these cabbages randomly have not done well. They're all planted at the same time in the same soil with the same water, so I'm not really sure what was happening there. But that is what can happen when you plant stuff, and I know that sometimes things aren't going to survive. What I ended up doing was essentially starting succession planting, where I took some kale, cauliflower, and cabbages and reseeded them and started them. So I'll let them grow up in the greenhouse for a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month, get to nice little starts, and then I'll end up replacing the ones that aren't doing well, which will actually work out nice because by the time the ones that are doing well are harvesting, then I'll be able to plant the new ones in and get them going. I also took some time, and when I had let my beets, these are beets that I had let go to seed, I didn't know what to expect. I thought they were going to send up like a stalk, maybe 2, and they have sent up this wild amount of it's kind of a mess. I don't know what to do with it. So I thinned it out, trying to keep it from falling over and stuff, and so we'll see how this goes, but this is definitely an experiment. And something I don't typically record myself doing is I've been harvesting a lot of broccoli, and my broccoli stems are very long, and I actually eat all the way down on the stem, and that's just a harvest for a day. And I went and checked on all of my squash back on the septic mound just to kind of see how they're doing. And yeah, it's midday and it's warm, so the leaves will kind of wilt down, but they definitely recover after that, and they're all looking good. I also had pulled out, I had left a kale go over winter, and I had pulled it out, and I noticed it was full of seed pods, so I'd have those drying out in the greenhouse. And the final thing I did this day was I had, you saw earlier in the video that I had a couple like squash I need to figure out what to do with. And so this is my asparagus bed, which has very limited asparagus coming up as they're getting established. So what I ended up doing was planting 2 butternut squash kind of at one end, side by side, and I'm just gonna let them kind of fill in the row between there because I'm not gonna need that row for anything. The next day, I actually forgot to record this, but I harvested my first harvest of spinach, and these spinach leaves are gargantuan. They're like, huge. I'll show you kind of how big they are. And so what I end up doing is I chop them up. I do a real rough chop, and I throw them in those sort of plastic shoebox things that you guys maybe have seen in previous videos, and I got 4 of those full. So that's kind of crazy. Here's another look on another day of my cauliflower, and you can kind of see the variability better in this lighting, I think, than the last lighting. This is trying to see, are my stakes holding them up doing better? And I think, maybe not, we're not sure. The only task I did this day was, it is about time to harvest my oregano, so I went out and chopped a bunch down and spent half hour sort of picking leaves off. And what I do for my harvest is I cut it while it's fresh before it goes to flower, and then I put it on these metal sheet trays and leave it out in the sun for 2 or 3 days until it crisps up. And this becomes part of my Italian mix that I make with thyme and rosemary. And we are to today. So here's a look at my strawberry patch in the foreground with my cabbages and my lettuce behind it. And on the left-hand side, you see broccoli there with my cauliflower behind it. Here you're looking at my tomatoes with the peas in the background and my row of potatoes. Here's my onions in the foreground with some fava beans behind it, some other beans, and some corn on the right-hand side. And a closer look at my onions, you see that the seeds are producing, which I'm excited about because I'm trying to collect seeds this year. Here's a look at my corn and my cucumber, and in the background you see at the top my zucchini and some spinach. And here are my beans. I've got both runner beans and bush beans growing here. This is a look at my basil, my raspberries. I have some sunflowers there, some garlic as well. And closer look at my garlic, you'll see that actually the scapes are forming. These are the flower heads, and to really focus the energy into the bulb, I'm gonna pluck those off this week. And some of my strawberries are starting to turn color, which is super exciting. Here's a look at a butternut squash at the end, and this is a row of my blackberries that I planted with Marion boys and another variety. So I've got 2 not doing well squash on either end, but I hope they recover. And here's a look at my asparagus bed. I have some sunflowers planted along the row there. The asparagus is super hard to see because it's so thin, and there are my 2 squash that I planted. And lastly, my peas are starting to come in, which I am super excited about because I love peas. And here's a look at the greenhouse. A lot of these are flowers, but you can kind of see the cilantro kind of in the middle or on the right-hand side, and my basil. I've planted it out, and I'm letting it sort of grow for a little bit before it goes in. These are the new things I just seeded this week, and then here's some failure to launches sort of in the background. But I thought I'd leave you just with the panning view of the top of Buckhorn Pass from a hike that I took this last weekend.